Hi, I'm Dennis Moreland with Dennis Moreland Tack, and today we're pleased to have Ben Baldus Horsemanship at Bowie, Texas with us, and we're going to talk a lot about snaffles. Everybody's got one, but when do you use them? What do you use when? We're going to try to explain some of that. Ben, you start your colts in a hackamore.
Yes, sir. When we first put those rides on those colts and we first get them in for training, they've often had a halter on. Their halter broke to some degree, and that lope and hackamore, that nose band that you have just has such a great feel to it, and those colts understand that. So we put a number of rides. Maybe it's 10 rides, maybe it's 30 or 60 days in that lope and hackamore, and then we start to transition to the snaffle.
Right. What tells you when to go to a snaffle?
It can be a variety of things, particularly if I feel like I need maybe a little bit more shoulder control, a little bit more body control to pick up a shoulder left or right. It's time to move on to that snaffle.
That you don't get with a hackamore.
Yeah, it's just a little harder to get that with that lope and hackamore. But that lope and hackamore is a great place to start. They understand that nose feel and the pressure, and it puts a great foundation. And then after about 30 days, it's time to move on to the snaffle.
Okay. And when you start in a snaffle, like this is an Eggbutt.
Yeah, I like this Eggbutt snaffle a lot. The mouthpiece is very soft. We've got about a medium style mouthpiece in width. We've got some copper inlays to this Eggbutt. The cheek being real smooth and soft. We're looking at this snaffle and we're thinking about how this snaffle functions in the horse's mouth. First we have the mouthpiece. He's carrying that mouthpiece. The other component to a snaffle is that it's a direct pressure bit, no leverage with it, and as it slides through the colt's cheek, you can see as it pulls on Dennis's fingers there, that's the sensation the colt is feeling on the side of his mouth. So we have first operating off the pressure in the horse's mouth, and then second, the pressure on the colt's cheek. And we want to think about the cheek and how it's built and how smooth and soft it is to that colt's mouth as he's first learning to carry the snaffle. The fact that it's a fixed O-ring keeps it from spinning. And I think sometimes on those young mares, if they get fretful or worried or they're a little hot-natured, they might work that bit a lot. And if it's an O-ring that travels and moves, they're going to become a little bit more amped up and even have a little bit more anxiety. And the Eggbutt's a great tool to help that horse relax and just carry it. And it's a more solid feel as you're using it and training. It feels a little bit more solid and like you have a little bit more accuracy in timing to the horse's body and to the horse's feet as you use the Eggbutt. This Eggbutt's a great place to start.
Good. And then we have an offset D, which is similar principle.
I think so. To me, that D-ring has just a little bit more pressure on his cheek, a little bit different feel. This particular D has a slightly more mullen mouthpiece. It's a little bit more rounded, mullen.
Finer mouthpiece
yeah, it
too.
Is. Yep.
So it have a little more feel to it.
Yes, sir. This snaffle mouthpiece tapers towards the middle. It's slightly mullened and slightly more narrow in the middle, providing us a little bit more tongue pressure. And then the D, being a swivel D ring, is going to be a little more solid feel laterally. So as you pick up a direct rein right or left, and that slides through the colt's mouth, that solid D there is going to have a little bit more of a lateral feel to it. It's going to be a real solid feel. And again, this bit fewer moving parts, that horse is going to probably carry it a little quieter in his mouth, and has a great feel, that mullen mouthpiece like that.
Without the ring moving.
Yes, sir, absolutely. You know, as you're progressing through maybe some of those geldings or maybe some of those studs, you might want just a little bit different pressure, a little bit more pressure. And that slightly narrower mouthpiece with that D might give you that little bit more pressure you need to help him understand the cues and the training.
And as you progress, when would you start to use like this O-ring?
This O-ring here, like with a colt that's probably got 6 to 8 months of training on it, you know.
Ready to advance in the training.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You're wanting maybe more body control, a little more softness, and the O-ring is going to provide a little bit more pressure than the D-ring does on the cheek as it's coming through that colt's mouth. And the narrower mouthpiece is going to have just a little bit more pressure to it. This is even a snaffle that I sure might show in, you know.
And we have a lot of people showing at the snaffle bit futurity in this mouthpiece. It just works.
It does. It has a great feel to it, and it's great to show through the 3-year-old year into the 4-year-old year, even with those derby horses, and it feels really good.
as you progress in the training process, there's some other options that you may go to. This big snaffle.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's maybe a little hard to see on this video, but this is a heavy ring, heavy mouthpiece snaffle here. And this heavy mouthpiece can feel really, really good on perhaps a mare that's a little more sensitive. This heavy mouthpiece O-ring feels really good in helping that mare relax, or that stud relax a little bit to your hands and be softer to your hands. Sometimes we think smaller, 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 but really going to a heavy mouthpiece like that and a fat mouthpiece is just what those colts need.
And it may not be the bit you show in,
right?
But in August it might be the perfect bit for that
Absolutely.
colt. And if a colt wants to mouth the bit a little,
yes,
I leave it down a little in the corners of the mouth. I don't pull it up tight, and they'll learn to pick it up and carry it.
Absolutely.
And if they're holding the bit, they can't be fretting.
Right, right. They'll keep their mouth quiet
If
and
it's
closed.
pulled up tight, they can be fidgeted.
Absolutely.
But if you've got it dropped down, they pick it up and hold it. And when would you go to something like this 3-piece?
This has got a lot of neat aspects to it. We've got some copper rollers on it, the dog bone center, again, the O-ring cheek piece to it. It's going to have a lot of feel to it. It might have a little bit more sensitivity towards lateral flexion. As these donuts come across that colt's tongue, he's going to have a little bit more of a
Bigger
lateral,
signal.
yeah, lateral flexion, a little more signal. And a horse, again, that might be a little anxious, a little nervous, and a little mouthy on the bit and chewing the bit a lot, they might really like those.
Give him a little pacifier.
Right, absolutely.
And of course, everybody's got a twisted wire. When would you use this?
Particularly on a horse that was maybe a little heavy or a little bit dull in their face, as we're progressing into the finer parts, so like perhaps flying lead changes or speed control in the circles, we're wanting to fine tune that horse, you know, just to have a little bit more pressure and a little bit more precise pressure on that horse. Instead of pulling 3 or 4 pounds with the O-ring, smooth O-ring, we could probably pull a pound with a twisted wire. One of the things I think of when we look at all these bits, it's as much about our hands. If our hands are offensive and our hands are fast, whether you're using the smooth O-ring or whether you're using the twisted wire, it won't work. Our hands have to be really smooth and non-offensive in the way that we communicate with these horses. And then the variety of snaffles can make a huge difference in your training and be really helpful throughout the training process.
Ben, I really appreciate you stopping by, and hope this has been helpful.
Thank you, Dennis. I really appreciate it.
For more tips and to take a look at some of the country's finest handmade tack, log on to dmtack.com.